Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist, presented by Community America Credit Union. I'm Joel Goldberg, and it's so good to be back in the flow for season 6. And my guest on this episode has a background of more than 35 years of leadership experience in Fortune 500 corporations, startup ventures, nonprofit organizations, and after a successful career in the highly competitive technology and community sectors, he transitioned to nonprofit work. My guest today is Don Goldman. And in 2007, about the year before I got to Kansas City, he joined Jewish Family Services of Greater Kansas City as executive director and CEO. During his tenure, the agency has tripled in size, now providing essential human services for more than 10,000 individuals and families each year, regardless of faith, age, culture, and lifestyle. That's certainly the way that it should be. And there's a lot to talk about right now, so I'm very excited to bring in to the podcast Don Goldman, who has somehow, I guess, survived this year like so many of the rest of us in these COVID times, but yet so many people needing those services. Don, how are you?
I am doing great today, Joel. I'm really happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. And I think that this has been such a moment in leadership, in community, in empathy, and that's true for businesses, for the nonprofit sector, and really for everyone we know. So let's start with that. What has this last year been like?
This last year has been incredible. Obviously, it's been difficult for everyone, right? I mean, it's been a tough year personally, but I will say it's been an incredible year for JFS and for the nonprofit sector in general. I remember talking to a few people when COVID hit that shut down because they just, in certain businesses, that's what happened, right? And that was really difficult. In the nonprofit sector, we didn't shut down. We had to grow more and serve more people than ever, and we had to do it with almost no planning. So I remember we thought we were trying to get ahead of COVID in late February last year. And we had some planning meetings. And, JFS, as many nonprofits, we're strong in a lot of things. We're strong in people skills. We're strong in social work. We're not technology leaders. I come from a tech background, but my staff, for the most part, doesn't. And we had to get ready and think, well, how are we going to do things? And if we may be separated, and we never thought we'd be separated as long as we were. But with very little planning on a dime, what it was, March 11th, around that last year, we, over a week, just transformed our services and became tech people and didn't cut back, but offered more services than ever. Over last year, we doubled the size of our food pantry, increased our mental health services by 50%, and had to serve older adults who are isolated in their home remotely, when many of those older adults, weren't familiar with technology at all. So it's just an incredible year. And, I couldn't have been more proud of my staff. And it is just like, it was a really difficult year and they worked really hard, but they did incredible things.
There's no real way to plan for something like this, as much as, even if you have pandemic planning, which I think everybody now forever will. I think it was, for a lot of businesses, one of those things that you tell me from an executive standpoint that you may need, but you don't really fathom the fact that you actually would need it, right? You have your disaster planning, you have your worst case scenarios, but now in the case for you guys, sadly, a lot of businesses had to go away. They couldn't survive it. I don't think you guys had a choice. There are just too many people that needed you, and I suspect more people than ever needing you at a time where you are having to operate in a different way.
Right. That's right. We couldn't. And in fact, we had to make the decision to say we have to serve everyone that comes to us, because who else is going to do that? There were some other food pantries that did just shut down. They were smaller, didn't know what to do, completely volunteer run, and said, we don't know how to be safe and do this. So they just shut down. So that pushed even more people to us, and we had to do that. And the other piece of it is, nonprofits work by getting funders, by getting, people who give us grants and donations. And to double in size is something we don't just do. We did, and we prepared for it, but we also had to get the support from the community. And, a year ago or 14 months ago, we weren't sure, while everybody's suffering, will that come through? The stock market was crashing. A lot of our donors might have thought, hey, I've lost money. Funders came, and none of that mattered. We just got, in a week or two, we sent out an appeal and into COVID, and we got incredible response, despite the fact that the world seemed to be crumbling around us.
You mentioned the technology piece to this, which all of us, by the way, have become some form of experts or not in Zoom and Teams and all those things. I say not because it feels like even the greatest experts. I mean, those of us that I'm doing baseball interviews via Zoom.
Right.
I mean, I haven't been to a legitimate press conference in 2 seasons now. Everything with the manager and the players is via Zoom. And it, like some days you can't hear the person or you're on mute. At the simplest level, we've all been guilty of having the mute button on. And so everyone has had to figure this out. That includes those that you're serving as well. With that technology background, I know that's different than what's been going on here, but how were you able to get your team and all of your people on board and moving in the right direction? I would imagine in a quick way too. I mean, there's a massive pivot here.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard having a technology background and actually being comfortable with technology. So just give you an idea, I had used Zoom. I'd used it half a dozen times. I wasn't an expert, but I'd used it. In fact, we had one Zoom account. We're a staff of about 65 right now, although that's a little more than we were then. But we had one Zoom account. I used to share it with our director of volunteers because how many Zoom meetings did we have? We had an account, we shared it, we had one license. I had Microsoft Teams was fairly new and we had access to it, but actually my administrator office and I played with it and technology person a week or two before, and not to say about Microsoft, but Teams didn't work very well a year and a half ago. And so we tried it, and then all of a sudden, but none of my staff, I'd say other than a couple of people, had touched either of those things. And so we just had to keep rolling it out. And a week into it, we had dozens of Zoom licenses, and we had to be helping people to learn the technology remotely. So it's not like we all got in a room and said, let's practice with Teams. What we said is, everybody go home, take your portable, and then we will roll this out and you have to figure this out. But within 3 days later, therapists who had not done any remote sessions, I mean, we're actually doing Zoom counseling. And so we just had no time. Now, did we do this perfectly in the first week? No. We rolled it out and we got it to work. And it probably took weeks before we did it. We also had, not to get too technical, a virtual private network, which is a quirky thing to get into. And it worked fine for me when I was working from home and a couple of people who work from home. It worked terribly as a situation where everybody is working from home, or almost everybody. I mean, I should say our pantry people didn't get to go home. Right? You need to be there to have physical food distribution. But it was really hard, and it took a lot of effort. And the other piece is, I now have a director of technology. I didn't then. And so I was the director of technology. I had to step in and do that. So it made the effort. But what's incredible is, and I was talking to a colleague in St. Louis, and they had been looking at doing telehealth in their counseling. She said for 5 years, and they kept thinking, we'll prototype it, we'll do it, we'll talk about if it's going to work. And they hadn't done it. And they, like us, in a week, just did it. So the need, and COVID said, we can't just think about it. We can't just say, we'll prototype it and let it run out. We just had to do it. And it's bumpy, but it works. And, it works. And actually clients find, while there's some negatives, there are a lot of benefits, right? You don't have to travel. You can be feeling not perfectly and still have a session.
So I want to get into a little bit more of that in a bit, but let's, and I should have done this to start, but you've mentioned the food pantry, the name, Jewish Family Services. So that would certainly let people that are unfamiliar with JFS know that these are services that, in the simplest terms, apply to families. This is so much more than a food pantry. This is a massive organization. Just talk a little bit about those services, because I think it also goes back to everything that led to this discussion, that there are so many people that you have had an impact on, and even more so that have needed your services during this pandemic, during the toughest of times. What's the range of those services, Don?
Yeah, and first of all, I just want to start and say, by people say Jewish Family Services, oh, is this just for the Jewish community? No, I mean, Jewish Family Services comes from the Jewish community. It's one of our key social service agencies, but we help everyone, regardless, as you mentioned, of faith, lifestyle, all the list of things. And in fact, the majority of people we serve are not Jewish. We're certainly a place Jewish people feel comfortable coming to, but we want everyone to feel comfortable. Yeah, we talked about the pantry, and that's part of a program we call Kesher KC. And Kesher is the Hebrew word for connection. And that's why giving people food is a core of what we do in that program, people who are in financial distress. But it's not all we do. We help them with rent, with utilities, with mental health services, with all those things. People don't get just in financial stress because of one thing. Maybe they've lost a job, but maybe they have other things that are going on in their life, whether it's mental health challenges, employment challenges. And so we try to do that and connect. And that's why we picked the term Kesher. Also, there's a negative stigma of someone, we talk about as a food pantry so people understand it. But when we're communicating to clients, we call it Kesher KC, because we don't want to say you're going to a food pantry, there's a stigma. We want to say you're coming to Kesher KC. They don't have to know what Kesher means. It's a nice, friendly name. But that's a core part of what we do. That's what people think of a social service agency. But it's not all we do. As I said, I've talked about mental health services. We've been doing mental health services since the 1940s. And we're a provider of counseling from, I think we say, from 3-year-old to 103, and to a wide range of people. And also, mental health is important. We run something called the Greater Kansas City Mental Health Coalition, and have some programs in school called UBU, because there's a stigma with mental health and mental health issues. And so we have been working for more than a decade to try to reduce that stigma, first in the Jewish community, but then we brought it into the whole community, and we took it to schools with our UBU program, that you can be yourself, and that's okay. And you don't have to be perfect, and you can discuss your issues. And the third major area is older adults. We're all aging, and our society doesn't help people age very well, and community. Most people think that they want to move, 20 years ago, you thought people wanted to move to a retirement community or an elder care center. And certainly some people do, but over 90% of people want to age in their home, but do not have the resources to do that. We help provide those resources, whether it's our social workers figuring out in families whether people can stay in their home maintenance services, or transportation, taking people to the doctor's office or the grocery store when they can't drive anymore. So we have a real broad range of services that we provide, serving in the last year, over 10,000 people throughout the community.
So you made this switch into the nonprofit world. It's been a number of years now too, but two totally different worlds, but I know also worlds that have enough similarities where you can play off of one, what you learned, and take that into the other. What was that transition like after such a successful career and moving into the nonprofit world where you've lived for such a long time now?
Yeah, it was, I was helped in the transition in that I took a break after a very busy career in an entrepreneurial role and internet and technology in the early 2000s. I took a break and was staying home with my kids. So I was a stay-at-home dad, which was a really unusual thing in Kansas City in 2001. I got to tell you, I was the only one in the PTA meeting during the day. I was the only kid who came to library and things. And it was great. I really enjoyed it and loved the time with my kids. And it wasn't planned, first of all. When I was coming back, some opportunities came up in the nonprofit sector. And actually, when I got to JFS, it was actually someone I'd worked with in both business and personal, approached me about JFS. And I was like, I've been in telecom and internet. I don't know why you would want me to do that. But I think she was a business leader, and she said, JFS was struggling at that point. And she said, she was going to become the board chair. And she said, this is like a business turnaround, that you have a struggling agency. It does great work. And I'm an MBA, and they tell you when you take business school, you should be able to learn any new area and industry. And so I was like, okay, and interviewed. And my motivation also, my mom was aging at this point. And so, and she was in New York, where I grew up. And I realized how bad the services were for older adults. So actually, one of the core services that JFS offered, even though it was different then, kind of motivated me, because I had just spent the last year or two realizing how bad the social services were. This was in New York, and how difficult it was for my mom to age. So that was kind of a motivation. But it was really, it was really different for me when I started, because you're learning a new industry in a sense. You're learning social. I don't know how many social workers I talked to before this. So it was really different to get started. But now, having done it for 14 years, which to me is incredible. I mean, if you'd asked me then, there's no way I'd still be doing. That's the longest I've ever held, not just a job, but with any one firm. Is, running a nonprofit's not that much different than running a business. It has all the same things. While we're not for profit, we can't lose money. You have to make money. You have to make money by raising money. Instead of selling things, you have to sell the mission. That's kind of what you're selling. All the people stuff, exactly the same. The people may be different, but the things are really the same. So I got into it thinking it was going to be a new world. Yes, it's human services, social services are different, but all the things about leadership and people, those are exactly the same, really.
Yeah, that's the common theme with any profession. I tell people that all the time. They say, you're in baseball, it's got to be the greatest job. It is. I love it. But it's about people. It's not so much about, ooh, you get to talk to this guy, you get to talk. Yeah, but if you don't treat them as people and figure out how to make those connections and those relationships, it doesn't really matter who the celebrity or what it is. So that to me never changes. I wanted to ask you too. I mean, you talked about the difference in the nonprofit world. You can't lose money. You've got to be able to raise money. And you had that experience. I mean, you took that in with you. And I know in looking at your background, chief operating officer at Birch Telecom, helped grow the business to more than 200 million and 2,000 employees, and then co-founder of BizSpace, which was a .com launched in 96, and you raised nearly 6 million in venture capital. So how much did those experiences, and how much do those experiences now help you, or even in the last year when you really needed to get out there and help people?
I think there was one area it really helped me, and another area I had to learn. In the area it helped me, the stuff about working with people and creating a great work environment. I will say, the time I spent both at BizSpace and Birch Telecom, especially, one of the things we worked hard about, if I talk even now to some of the colleagues that work there, they will tell me that this was the best place they ever worked. And that was clearly our goal, because we were working crazy hours, 60, 80 hours a week. You're dealing with venture capitalists. Making money then didn't matter. What mattered, if you remember, that world was growing. And you had to just keep growing and changing based on what the market needed. And so the only way that we thought, and in fact, the Dave Scott, the founder of that, and kind of a partner in the whole management team, really wanted to make sure this was a great place to work. And so that, to me, those years there helped me understand how important that was, because I worked in places where that wasn't important. And it's not motivating. If you take care of people, then going through something in the last year is much easier because, yeah, it's really hard and you're stressed, but they know they have a supportive, company or agency to do it. So I really learned that in that environment. I will tell you, fundraising, I had to learn here.
Mm.
That was something I had because I was the COO there. I wasn't the fundraiser. The CEO was the fundraiser. And honestly, I think he probably was much more comfortable with it. So this was something I had to get past my comfort zone. If you'd asked somebody 15 years ago, I'd be doing this and I'd be fun. In fact, at one of our events, um, uh, the former CEO of Birch was sitting in the audience while I'm making this pitch, and he came to me and was like, "Who are you?" You would always defer that to me. You would never do that. But that's the thing I had to learn over the last 14 years.
Well, it's amazing what you can learn and learn after you've been around a long time too. And that's one of the beautiful things about life to me is when we can learn every single day. All right, I want to hit you with my baseball themed questions after a long and successful, not after, during a long and successful. I'm not trying to get you out of here, don't worry.
I
But
appreciate that.
no, I would not do that. But a lot of lessons learned, as I mentioned too, and a lot of victories. So what's been your biggest home run?
I think the biggest home run for me was actually creating the pantry. When I formed JFS, we didn't have a food pantry. We had a small program that we inherited from someone else where we delivered boxes of food to people. And it wasn't a great program. It was, the box included like a jar of mayonnaise and jar of ketchup and some stuff every month. I don't know how many people, I don't want to talk about people's food choices, but very few people use a jar of mayonnaise every month. And it wasn't very human centered or people centered. And I spent about 6 or 9 months looking and learning, because I knew nothing about food pantries, of what other food pantries were in the market, what the need was. Actually talked to harvesters, which not everybody understands. They're like a wholesale provider. They're the food bank for the community, but they're not the pantry that serve. And actually, they encouraged us to enter. I thought they would say, hey, there's 600 pantries in Kansas City. We don't want one more. But instead, they were like, no, we would like an integrated service provider like you to do this. And why it was a home run for us is doing this. First of all, it gave us an opportunity to do it really well. We looked both around the country and here and said, how can we be as good or better than anybody and be respectful? If we move past COVID, you get to see our pantry, especially in post-COVID operation. It's like a little grocery store. It's you get to choose what you need. You don't get a box and someone tells you this is what you're going to get. It's just like a grocery store, but we don't charge you at the end. And it's also something back to the what I said about Kesher and Connection. We connect to you and we talk, and the volunteers who work there and the staff get to know people and get to see what else they do. And we've learned that a pantry is a great core for all the other services. If you're just asking someone to help them, but you're not in person, you're just talking to them on the phone and interviewing them, you can't develop this personal relationship, while you're asking them what their income is and things. But if you're getting to know them and connect to them, and you're seeing them every month when they come to shop in the pantry, you develop a relationship and you can help them better and they trust you. And, you can really make an impact. So the pantry transformed our whole effort of working with people in financial distress. And I didn't know that going in. I thought we were making kind of like a decision about what the need was, but it had a great impact on us and the services we provide.
How about a swing and a miss over the years, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so it's an interesting swing and a miss. I think that because it's going to sound like, well, this isn't a miss, it's a success. But we opened a building in Brookside 4 years ago, and it was my COO and I spent our lives on working on that building, both the operational side and the fundraising side of kind of rehabbing a building, figuring out what it should look like and how it fit the culture. And we spent like a year doing that. And the building is really successful, so that's not the swing and a miss, and the location. But how I did it was, I was thinking, well, this is a nonprofit. We have to be really frugal, and I know I'm raising some bunch of money, but I need to do this myself. I can't hire somebody to help fundraise for this building, and I can't hire someone to project manage and operational this, and do this big this project. So she and I did it ourselves and did it for a year. That was a mistake, and I paid for it after, because what it meant was, for a year we were taking our eyes off the ball of the regular or the day-to-day part of the organization. People did fine, the work got done, but a whole bunch of things happened on the culture side that and remember, we're growing at this point, so we basically lost some of the culture while we weren't actually working on it, because basically I'm not in the office for months, or barely stopping by and running in and out but can't talk to people. Then you're not dealing with the people side of things. So it seemed like, hey, okay, I can work double job and we can get it done. But it didn't. And when we came back about 6 months later, we realized, wow, we have some territoriality and infighting and things like that. Where did it come from? And in thinking about it after, I realized, oh, this is because we weren't working on all the just, nuts and bolts kinds of things about working with people and building the relationships, especially while you're growing and new people have come in. So for a year or two after, we had to explicitly go and work on culture. We had to develop, we have things called guiding principles that we structured and developed over the years. And we have a great culture today, but it took a year or two to work. And while we would have had some work, I don't think we would have had that much work if I hadn't taken that time on the other project.
So a success, but a good lesson learned along the way too. Last baseball themed question, small ball. That's what the book is about that I wrote, Small Ball, Big Results. What are the little things that add up to the home runs for you and JFS?
So I think I've mentioned them a little, and I was looking at your book, and I think this is one of the areas you talk about. And there are two parts, which is really trust and relationships. When, for me, if you don't trust people and your staff, and they don't trust you, and you don't develop that relationship, I think everything is a challenge. And it's just not automatic. It takes time about getting to know people, making sure people feel comfortable that if they're really unhappy about something, they can tell you. They don't tell 5 other people. They'll tell you. And, I talk about some of the culture challenges. That's what we were working through, where people would tell other people about issues. They wouldn't tell me, or they wouldn't tell others. And they would this person is thinking this about them. And it's like, well, what can I do with that? If you have an issue, you need to come and get with me. And that takes, I would say, trust is something you have to make sure to work on, because if you break it, and I've had cases in the past where somebody broke the trust, and in such an explicit way that lied about specific things, that's really hard to rebuild, because then every other time you work, you're thinking, okay, but do you really mean this? And it's also something I work with all our, not just staff, but our funders. I will tell people if things didn't go right, because I want them to know that they can trust me. There were issues before I came to JFS where people would cover stuff up. And it's like, if you do that, people will not trust you. And so my first couple of years at JFS were rebuilding trust, that I'll tell you if it goes well, but I'll tell you if it doesn't. And if you lose trust, it's really hard to rebuild.
It takes a long time to build and can be lost in a moment. And I think we all know that. And I think it's something that requires attention every single day, just like the important elements of culture and small ball do. All right, Don, 4 final questions as we round the bases. We'll just hit a few different subjects here. The first one, I'll start you out lighthearted, because I know I get this a bunch. Does anyone ever call you Goldberg? Because I get plenty of Goldmans.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember if somebody does. People call me. I'm not sure they call me Goldberg. They call me Dan a lot. So
Okay. I get a lot of Jeffs too. It's funny. I've got a friend, Jeff Goldman. He's not related to you. I asked him. He's out of St. Louis, but I'll get some Jeff Goldbergs. I think maybe that's because I work with Jeff Montgomery, and then I'll get some Goldmans and some Gold this or
yeah,
something with a gold or a berg in it,
right.
and not always Goldberg, right? I mean, I guess they're throwing all that together. So just curious, a fun one
Yeah.
there. Second one, I know that I heard that you had a deep fascination of NASA and space and all that growing up, which is really resurfaced again too. So tell me about. I don't know if you had that dream of being an astronaut. Like it seems like growing up, everyone wanted to be an astronaut. I don't know, a firefighter or an athlete or something. And there are other things, of course. But tell me about that. And it's a fascinating time right now too.
Yeah, it is a great time again. I think there was some bad years where there was nothing there, but
Yeah.
yeah, I loved it as a kid. I grew up in the '60s, and I had a scrapbook with like every NASA, launch and things like that. I don't know where that scrapbook is about everything. I would read about things. I can't remember that much from the '60s, but I remember the, moon landing and all that. It was just, it was a time where, I mean, I was really interested, but boy, everybody was, and we got back a little to that, but not completely. Did I want to be an astronaut? I think so, but I think I probably wouldn't have been a great physical. I'm not even good on roller coasters, so I don't know that I would have been a successful astronaut. One thing I did, which is kind of my sort of bucket list thing to do, is I got to see the final shuttle launch, and it was a big deal because I went to Florida twice. Because the first time I went, I'm standing out there and it got canceled, and I came home and came out for the next one. And getting tickets was really hard, and you're standing there, but it was just being at the launch. You're I don't know how many mile away or something, but you still feel it. I mean, you hear the launch and you feel a shake, and so that 30 seconds of feeling it go by was incredible. I don't do that many things like that, like a bucket list, but that was great.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool one for sure. Third question, as we round the bases, you've been in the nonprofit world now for such a long time, much longer than you ever expected, as you mentioned before, if you even expected going down this route. What's your favorite thing about being in the nonprofit world?
I love the mission. I guess I loved the stuff I did in telecom and internet. We were so excited about the products we were offering. Now they would seem ridiculously easy, right? Everybody has them. But in the '90s and early 2000s, the stuff we were talking about was was supposed to provide all these kinds of services, and that was great. But knowing every day that we're helping people every day, and hearing some of the stories, and I don't work with clients, but I get to hear from our staff, is incredible. And I'll tell you the other thing that I didn't know 14 years ago. Most of our staff, or they're social workers or clinical social workers, not all, but they all choose this profession. They don't choose it for the money. They choose it, because they care. And it's a great group of people, and I love working with them. And I've learned so much. I've learned about things that actually help me, that help me understand how to work with people better, how to care, how to um, uh, how that things, back to mental health, that in the business world, you're like, sometimes you just think, hey, you just have to do things. You don't think about the human side. And I've learned so much about the human side and what it takes to process things, and that we're not robots, that
Yeah.
that we have to think about I guess the human side of what we do. So I really love that about the nonprofit world. Certainly the human services side of it.
Well, that leads me to my last question as we wrap things up, the walk-off question as we round the bases, and it's a little bit about going forward and the future. I mean, you've mentioned mental health so many times here, and guess what? I could every interview that I do in any profession, and I've had all types on this podcast, will in some form or another bring up mental health. Not because suddenly people are dealing with mental health, although they are dealing with it more so in part because of this pandemic, but the stigma is starting to go away. You talked about stigma before. And so if the stigma is going away, that means there are more people that need attention, that are willing to ask for attention. Add in the pandemic, and that makes it even more so. And then you talked about the telehealth and the technology piece of all of this and what we've learned. So what does the future look like for JFS and really all of us?
So it's complicated, and we're still figuring this out. But first of all, on the mental health side, I think it's an area, you're exactly right, that the stigma is finally being reduced. It's not gone, and there's still pockets of community where there's significant stigma, but no question overall there's a lot less. We're still at a parity where physical health, I mean, there's certainly challenges, but there's a lot of supply of services. There's not nearly the right supply for mental health. It's supposed to be, that all health plans equitably give you physical as well as mental health, but it's just not the case. There are wait lists, and there are not enough providers. So that is certainly something that has to grow. I think in general, in terms of us, we're continuing to grow. The economy is roaring back, but not for everybody. And need for the people who are left behind is still significantly out there. The other thing I'll say that is the future is, we're not giving this up, this remote working and the telehealth. That's not going away. We will start to get back, and you'll be able to see a therapist in person. In fact, we have just reintroduced young child counseling in the last few weeks, because doing counseling or play therapy with a 4-year-old on Zoom doesn't work very well. And so we coming back to that, and that will certainly be the case. But I expect couldn't tell you if it's 40% or 60%, but a large percentage of our mental health services will be remote. Now that we've learned these tools, we may not want to do it 100% of the time, but boy, it's a really nice alternative. And so I think hybrid work will be our future. And the challenge is that's actually harder than either extreme. We know how to do in-person work. We know how to do technology now, but we have to do both. Now we have to be flexible. Like today we're going to do telehealth, tomorrow this. And how do we use our space, that for both? So our biggest challenge, what we're spending a lot of time on, is what does hybrid technology look like? How do we grow? How do we figure out what needs to be in person? And then how do we have both? And that's the challenge of 2021 for us.
And going forward, indeed. And it will be interesting to see what the world looks like as we continue to emerge from this pandemic and get back to a new normal, some old pieces of normal and some new elements of it too. The organization is Jewish Family Services of Greater Kansas City. They serve everyone. The website, if you want more information, is jfskc.org, jfskc.org, Jewish Family Services of Greater Kansas City. Don Goldman, the long time executive director and CEO. I can relate to it because I've been doing Royals baseball since 2008, so that time period very much resonates with me. Congratulations on everything you've been able to do over at JFS, and to your staff and the growth and the way they've been able to help people, especially during these tough times. Don, I really love the conversation and the insight. Thanks for spending time on Rounding the Bases.
Thanks so much, Joel. I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you having me on.